it's Kimmy here. Who else would it be? I have something to share with you today. It's going to be a little bit of a quick video compared to what I'm usually doing, but I want to focus just on Ethereum. One, I don't really focus a lot on Ethereum. Two, it's known to have this bad reputation really for the past 2 years, even more so. I've certainly made fun of it quite a bit as well. So I think there's a lot of sentiment around it that just ETH is just really lacking in its performance. And I can kind of share some stuff as we get through this introduction. I've also mentioned that we kind of need Ethereum to run as a bullish catalyst. Now, all that being said, I think I have good evidence to suggest that Ethereum could be bottoming out soon or already has bottomed out. We're going to go take a look at this and we'll lay down all the facts and see what we can come up with. So first of all, I want to lay down Ethereum's lack of performance. I don't think this is going to be breaking news, but I want to spend maybe 2 minutes to look at this really. And the best way to do this, I could compare this across the board, right? But basically going to look at this from the current price action. And so right now your current price is about 16.35. If I just mark it all the way back to the first time it actually got this, was really roughly around 1,500 days ago. So we could just mark it down here. So pretty much right here. So about 1,533 days ago. And so, which is February of 2021. So the beginning of February 2021. So in the span of really like over 4 years, it's been roughly the same price. Now we visited this price back and forth. We've had the bear market, of course. And so that perfectly makes sense, right? But the problem is with something like Bitcoin, like we went down as low as like 16,000 roughly, and it wasn't really that low in compared to other prices. I mean, that was low in a sense, but it actually has recovered since then. And that's the thing. Like we can look at other assets here. I mean, even at the drop here with Bitcoin, it's still at 84,000, almost 85,000. Even Solana is Solana bear market was at basically like $20. It was less than that. Actually, I think it was like $10. Actually, I'll just go ahead and check it here. And so like the absolute drop here is about 8.4. Now, a lot of people want to do the FTX issue and say that it was, that's why it was down lower. And I do agree with that. I think that was a catalyst. But at the same time, if you take really this whole range here, even from the top of this range, you're still looking at like $27. Okay. So let's be generous and say the 21, that $27, right? And so from there to current price is still about $384. Okay. And so the lows versus Bitcoin, and we can look at this. I got some chicken scratch on here. From the lows here, and again, just look at this order block instead. So we're going to be generous about this. This is still up pretty high. It's about 350%. Okay. And that's the thing, like Bitcoin is still, it's only 17-18% from its highs. That's not bad actually. Compared to the sentiment that we have, that's actually pretty decent. Now Ethereum here, I'll get rid of this and we'll look at some stuff here. From its low, it's only up about 60%, which is still okay, but that's not good. That's not the best. It's by far the lowest, right? And it's probably even underpacing a lot of stocks as well, and just buying the S&P 500, for example. And so you have those situations, right? And so that's kind of what you're working with. Now, that's most of what I want to talk about with the lack of performance. That it's just an asset that hasn't performed well, and also at the same time, I think this is the real reason we haven't had a big altcoin season. A lot of people are focusing on, well, it's the meme coins or it's even pump fund, which I agree with the pump fund. Just like pump fund extracted volatility from the market, but at the same time, Solana also extracted with the meme coins. But why did it get extracted? It got extracted because Ethereum has not had the innovation that it has before, and certainly is more innovative. And that's not what I'm arguing, but as far as like exponentially, a lot of things have happened fundamentally as well. So, for example, EVM. I talk about this a little bit. I'm talking about this more often in the future, but Ethereum virtual machine, a lot of coins, protocols are trying to use EVM capabilities so that way you could build on AVAX, for example, or another coin like Sonic, which is a newer one, and say like, okay, this is good, this is helpful, and that is helpful for innovation, but that's going to take away the mind share from Ethereum, and that means the lack of mind share is going to be lack of price as well. And so that's why we've have not performed as well. Now, that's pretty much it as far as the performance. I mean, even as far as even if you want to just, we are only, was it here, from the close to the current, we're only 20% up from where we were in January of 2018. Okay, and we went lower, of course, but we also did it with Bitcoin back in 2022. So you're telling me for the past 2,600 days, we're only up 20, even just to be generous, 30%. That's pretty bad. That's very, very, very bad. And we're talking, we're getting close to stable coin level here. And so I say this to say, one, I wanted to introduce this to you first. Two, I do think a lot, like, we poke fun at this, but this is pretty warranted. Like, my intent's not to continue to make fun of it, but if you look at other assets, it's clear where you should be putting your money, because Ethereum's not giving us that value proposition. It's one thing where, yeah, it could go double, and we'll see in a second why I think it will, very quickly actually. But versus something like Solana that was down to like $20 and it went to 250. Well, that's an easy play. That's an easy play. So that basically I want to show the lack of performance. But let's go into the charts in more detail, and we're gonna look at this level by level, do the analysis, and see, do we think this is a bottom? I think there is a good case to find out that this is the bottom of this recent downtrend. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so the first thing when we're trying to look at this to see if there's a bottom, we're going to identify this level by level. So first of all, one thing I want to do, look at the recent drop down. I should do this in the last section, but we're down about 60% roughly since the drop down back basically in early December. Okay, so it's been about 4 months, I guess, and so we got that going on. That's a deeper cut than Bitcoin. I think it's close to Solana. I think it's roughly the same. And so we have that going on. But what we want to do here is I want to look at a few different levels. I'm going to look at the 3 month first. And I went ahead and removed my band because it's just kind of being noisy for us right now. And so one thing I'm looking at that's very, like, I could identify a few different things here, but what I'm looking at here is you have this bullish breaker right here. This is what I'm interested in. This is really in line with the current price, okay? Now we do have over 2 months left here to go, so we have some time, not too concerned about it. Another time frame I want to look at is the 2 week, which matches up this. So what I'm going to do is kind of combine these together, and so now you have this structure here, and it's really this entire structure, right? And so I'm leading into something with this, so just bear with me. But you have the top end of this structure, right? And so what I want to really do is I take a fib tool. So this is what the fib tool looks like if you're not familiar with it. You have the highs, you have the lows, you have the mid. It's a really easy way to structure a section of the block. This is really a Fibonacci block, or Fibonacci levels, but I use it as a complete block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match the top up to this, match the bottom to the bottom of Ethereum, okay, and then I'm going to cycle that here, and then I'm going to get rid of that block. And so that's that's how I identify these levels. If you're interested in how I did that, I'm going to make another video explaining that much more in detail. But this is the 2 week chart. And the reason I'm putting this out here, I could do other levels. This is relative to this zone. It's at the midline structure. When I do my analysis, a lot of midline structures tend to get retested, and then they continue to go up instead. So in this case, they would go up. If it's bearish, it would go down. But so you have that to work with as well. Another one I want to go to is the weekly. This is pretty much in line. You have this deviation, which I'm not too concerned about, but you also have this midline structure as well. And so we could adjust this, but I'm going to go ahead and just basically just keep it here. And so, because it lines up with this level here, this is the only level that doesn't match up. If it's off by 1, that's okay, because that's how deviations happen. Okay, this was a deviation as well from the upside. That's one reason we had the downtrend. And so you're working with that. So now on the weekly level, which is where we're at, we have this marker here. Okay, I think this is a great level for a few different reasons. So automatically, I think this is a good reason where we can start analyzing why we think this could be the bottom. One of the reasons I think so is because we have a very massive block here that's getting retested right at the mid. This is the perfect place for this to bounce. Now, the reason I say that is because the bigger the block, don't just think in terms of dates, which we will, So if you look at this from the bottom to the breakout point, it's about over 500 days. So that's a significant amount of time. Okay, so that's what we're working with. Pretty good. But not only that, we're also working with a price. Okay, so this is your low. We'll start here to the top. So you're working with like an 80% move here. So it's pretty wide, it's pretty tall. And so the reason I point this out is because there's a lot of orders in this section. Okay, there's a lot of support and demand here. But more importantly, is that this was fought over for over 500 days, and the conclusion was that it went to the upside, which means the consensus between buyers and sellers, it was concluded that this price was valid to justify it going up. Okay, if that makes sense. Now we're at the downside where now we're getting retested here, and you might be wondering, well, if it was had so much integrity, why did it go down below 1900 or versus the top? And that's where the order block comes into play, because if you want to quantify this easily, you mark it out as one block like this. Okay, that's how you mark it, like something like this. And so what you're looking at here is this isn't the most integrity line, neither is this one. This one is. Okay, so this line, this is where you decide. It's not very, I thought that would be darker, but that's fine. This is where you decide, you know your focal point, as far as if the supply and demand is going to out wrestle the opposing side. So that's what that looks like. So the midline determines for me how strong this is going to be. So if it holds the mid, that's good, and currently it is. Okay, that's the first thing I'm looking at. The second thing I'm looking at is really the drop from the downside. I know this is going to be a little cheesy for some of you. I do focus more on simplistic things. I don't tend to get too complicated. I'm looking at this as simple as this. It went down 60%. And therefore, if this is a valuable asset, this should be going up pretty soon. And there's a lot of technical analysis that can back me up with that. Mean reversion is a big one, where an asset is going to bounce back, where it's just like a rubber band. You got to think in terms of a rubber band. I'm also looking at this from, so like, let's say this was the top, this was the cycle top to the bear market bottom. We went 77%. Okay. So we were at 60. So we're about 17% from where we were at the drop down. Okay. Now, certainly we could go down here, right? That's possible. I don't think so, because again, we have this retest point, mainly this one, but we have this one as well. Okay. And so the structure does not really have us going. It doesn't make sense to go down to 3 digits anymore. Now we could, and if we do, that's going to be a prolonged breakdown. Okay, and so we can talk about that later. But this is where I think, if I am looking for a bottom, this is exactly where I'm looking at current price. Okay, we're at the mid. We've already dropped down 60%, which is pretty extreme for a non-bear market. I do not believe this is a bear market. I do believe this is a buy the dip market. Okay, a lot of people are scared about the tariffs and things like that. I'm not. And I gave reasons why in my last video for Bitcoin Brief. Go ahead and check that out. I posted that yesterday. It's called Bitcoin. It's my Bitcoin Brief. I do those 3 times a week: Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So, but that's what I'm looking at with this. Okay, 60% drop, good for a bounce. The other thing I want to look at, and I know this is controversial, I don't know why it is, but some people don't seem to care about it, is that when you're going, let's see, the 2-week chart should be loading up here pretty soon. We're pretty low on the RSI. Okay, so I'm gonna mark this out here at about where it's at here at 37. So there's a big red line here. This has only went down below this one other time, and that was the low. Okay, we have a history of when the RSI goes below 40, which this is why this is in blue. The top line is 50, the bottom line is 40. When we go, and this is most assets, by the way, when we go below the 40 RSI, it's very we tend to bounce back pretty quickly. Okay, and so the best example I have is right here. If you want to zoom this back up to the 40, okay, we've only been under that 3 times. And this time, okay, we bounced back. This was the low of that, even at the high of that low was $101. Bounced from that pretty quickly. Even during COVID, okay, it was at 120. Okay, so I think that's a good risk to reward ratio. I'm not saying it's going to go to $1 million in the next day. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just looking in terms of price. I'm not looking in terms of time, because if you're looking at terms of price and time, you're looking at momentum. Okay, I'm not looking for momentum. I'm just looking for trend right now, and which I also mentioned in my Bitcoin brief video yesterday. The differences between trend and momentum, why you should look at one or the other, or both, or neither. So go ahead and check that out. It was actually a pretty good video. So we're currently below that here. And so, or yeah, we're currently below it. But once we get above it, I'm willing to believe that that is the bottom. Once we get above that, I think that we're good. So that's the other thing that I'm looking at from that standpoint. Other thing, I'm going to switch to the third day, so I kind of switched off screen here, is that we have a bullish divergence here as well. And so that's another thing that I'm interested in. And so not only, and see, this is the thing, I'm so tired of having to explain myself about bullish divergences, RSI. Like, these are simple things that work, and they get made fun of all the time. But my point is, this is an effective area here. Not only that, when you have confluence, when you have a divergence that's confluent with the midline, tends to bounce pretty high. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. So those two things, with the RSI on the 2 week, with a 60% drop, with the midline retest on the biggest order block that Bitcoin has had. Okay, by far, like, I don't think people understand how big this is. This is 530 days, right? It, you know, this is that's almost like the entirety, that is the entirety of the bear market from the 17, 18, 19 run. Okay, people don't understand that. Like, that's how big that is. It's almost the same bars. Okay, and so this is pretty massive. That's why I think, again, the order blocks matter, the retest matter. This is too big, in my opinion. I don't want to say too big to fail, but that's kind of what I'm hinting at. Is that it should not fail. And if it does, Bitcoin's dying, or we're going to go into another 2 year term, bear market, whatever it might be. So I think there's good reason to believe the bottom is right now. So what does that look like, right? So one thing we can look at here, and so this also breeds the catalyst that if we bottom here, we move up. If we move up, the altcoins run. Okay, so if you're looking at this from a pure, if you want to do a very simplistic spot move, entry at current market, stop loss below here at about, just over 3 digits, about $1,023. And then I want to target the all-time high, because I also believe that we're going to go to higher time frames. Okay, I can give you my upward targets here in just a second. But this is what I'm looking at, a 5R trade with 187%. Okay, and so that's what I'm looking at. If you ask me for my personal long form trade, what I'm basically doing is taking these two markers here. It's very simple, and then marking it like so. Okay, so 7,530 is roughly what I'm looking at. So that's about a 10R from here. And you can increase that R value based off your risk percentage. So for me, for the weekly, it's usually about 5%. I risk 5% on long term. So that'd be a reward of 50% of my portfolio, for a move of 366%. So that's my upward target for that one. And so I think this is looking pretty good. I have no reason to think that we are going to go down much longer. I mentioned also in yesterday's Bitcoin brief video about the saturation theory. People are focusing too much on tariffs to where it's not going to have an effect. So I think this is looking pretty good overall. And so we'll see how that goes. But let me know what you think. I'm happy to discuss things more. Let me know in the comments what you are looking at with this. Again, I gave about 3 or 4 different variations of evidence to look at this. And honestly, Ethereum is overdue to give us a move, and it would really help out. Like, again, one reason we've struggled so much is the past cycle isn't necessarily because of meme coins. Meme coins have been profitable, but Ethereum hasn't pulled its own weight, and we really need it to for being a top 5 asset, basically, top 5 non-stablecoin asset. It needs to pull its weight. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'm happy to discuss things more in the comments. Like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.